We are back. New York City baseball, past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tyko. My co-host is Martin Rose.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Ralph.
How are you, sir?
Fine.
Jacksonville and via Jackson Heights and Staten Island. Jacksonville, Florida. Big difference. I have never seen the residential area in Staten Island. Is it much like Queens?
No. No, it's mostly single-family homes.
Okay, not a lot of apartments and what have you?
No. Very few apartment buildings, especially, there's your designated, city, city housing that every borough has somewhat of. But outside of that, it's, I would say 85-90% single family homes, or two family homes, like that. So,
and
very different.
No
very
apartments
different.
in Jacksonville, Florida. Not many.
Well, there are apartment complexes, like 2 or 3 stories. Not the kind of apartment buildings that we're used to seeing. Like nothing like what we grew up in at all.
Yeah, 6-story buildings and.
No, those don't exist. It's
okay.
You get your apartment complexes that are maybe no more than 3 stories. Mostly probably 2. That have that have a gym and a pool and stuff like that. But I live in a suburban area in a cul-de-sac with just private homes, all ranch style, one level. We're actually renting a house. Peggy wanted to rent a house instead of going into an apartment. We've always had a house, so we got a house. But it's in a very suburban area with a
happy life is a happy life, Marty.
Yeah, you got it. Exactly.
Okay. Are you going to continue to rent? Are you going to stay in Jacksonville? What are the
yeah, we're gonna continue to rent. Now, whether we're going to be staying in this particular house, I don't know, because we only have a 1-year lease, and it doesn't come up for discussion until you have 3 months left, which would be for us December. So, we don't know if what the owner's plans are, whether he's still going to rent it out, whether he wants to move here himself, whether he wants to sell it, which I doubt. But if it's up for another year, we'll probably re-up for another year.
Oh, that's a good thing. That means you're happy.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, we like it here. It's not like South Florida where it's hot 12 months out of the year. You actually get a little bit of a winter here. Not like the Northeast, of course, but I mean.
You're very close to the Georgia border. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. How many miles? And
probably about no more than an hour's drive to the Georgia border, I would say.
Oh, very close. Very close.
Oh, yeah.
At least it'll be somewhat interesting in the winter. Although I've been to Florida in the winter, and it's been not as hot as I thought it would be. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, well, when we were here, South Florida is completely different. It's only, even if it's only 300 miles, to the places that people are more familiar with, like Fort Lauderdale and Boca Raton and those places. But here in the winter, it can be at night. It can get down into the 40s, possibly even a little colder. But in the daytime, when the sun's out, it's, in the 60s. So, and this is the dead of winter I'm talking about. So,
yeah.
usually,
that's
incredibly
won't
get worse than that.
Much like Alameda, believe it or not, northern winters. We average about 70 degrees year-round, and it's about as good a temperature as in the country, really. It's terrific. That part is excellent. And let's talk.
I know an old Air Force buddy of mine lives on the other side of the bay, in Foster City. I actually speak to him quite often. So,
Mert, I can remember you and I in the 70s, I guess. You came out to visit, and we went to Foster City to see your buddy.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure it was. And do you remember how windy and cold it was in Foster City? The South Bay.
Yeah, it was a little chilly. Yeah, you're right. I forget what time of year it was, but yeah, it was.
I do too, but it was very, very cold. I'm glad you stayed in touch with your buddy all these years. So when you come out to visit, you'll have two people to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Let's talk a little Met ball. I had a wonderful production day in comfortably zoned Radio Networkville. I did an interview with Duffy Dyer about a year ago, and it never made, well, let's put it this way, it never made YouTube, so that it was on the server for a while, and it dropped off the server, but never made YouTube. But I just realized that, found the interview in my archives, and it was done about a year ago. And the reason I looked for it in the first place, Yogi's been gone a year this week.
Right.
And the show I did with Duffy Dyer was about Yogi's passing and his memories of Yogi. So what I'm going to do is play that interview at the tail end of our interview. So anybody listening, you get to hear Duffy Dyer talking a year ago about Yogi. Incredibly great interview. As a Mets fan, as a Yogi fan, it was wonderful. So you get to hear that, Mert, and makes up for a little of my incompetence technically, because I had no idea it never made YouTube, and now that I know, I can correct it, and
good.
The world is the way it should be, on the up and up. What do you remember about Yogi? What are your early, as a Met, as a Yankee, first thing that comes to mind?
Wow. Well, I mean, I do remember him with the Yankees. I remember him probably more playing left field than as a catcher. I think he probably, I'm not sure when Elston Howard showed up on the scene. But I of course, in 1960, we all remember that famous shot where he's in left field watching Mazeroski's ball go over the fence.
Much like Andy Pafko's shot.
60 World Series, But I remember him swinging at balls almost in the dirt and golfing them into the right field seats. He seemed to do that quite a bit in Yankee Stadium.
I remember him swinging at balls over his head and tommyhawking them down the right field line. He never saw a pitch he didn't like. He's up there to hit, not to think. He was terrific. He took a lot out of
hitter.
Yeah, and were they ever rich in catching? Ellie Howard, they had Blanchard. By 61, when I think they had the best team we ever saw in our lifetimes, at least back then. And maybe, it's hard to compare generations, but it was a great team and one of many great teams. But they had 3 catchers hitting over 20 home runs. Admittedly, Berra did play a lot in left, but they were very deep. Blanchard and Howard and Yogi. And I do, too, remember him in 65, right before the last year, before I went in the Air Force. He and Warren Spahn made up this iconic battery. That they were both, I think it was the oldest battery ever, and 2 future Hall of Famers, and that was pretty terrific for the Mets.
Wow. And
he took them in '73 to the pennant. Very controversial season along the way. He was almost fired. I can remember the Post did a thing where they had this poll. When should Sheffing be fired? When should Yogi be fired? I mean, you talk about New York press is incredibly difficult. Which brings me to the problem with Bruce, I can't think of his first name, the Met outfielder, and his adjustment to playing in New York. He got a homer last night, if I'm not mistaken. Is he coming out of?
Well, I think what happened was Collins put him up to pinch hit a couple of games ago, and he came through. And you know how Terry is. You hit, you play. So, he's hoping, well, maybe he can catch something here. So, yeah, he did put him in the lineup. He did hit a home run. He's out there again tonight, but they're getting shut out in the 3rd inning, 6-0. So obviously nobody's doing anything.
5 a while back.
Yeah, but okay, if the guy gets hot, we know what he can do.
Right. Ironically, most of them were with Cincinnati. He's got 30 home runs, and I looked up, and Granderson has 30 home runs. A minute amount of RBIs, an incredible.
Yeah, Granderson's been hot recently. A lot of those homers are leadoff homers.
Right.
First guy, first batter of the game because he was batting leadoff. But on the other hand, he was hitting something like 118 with runners in scoring position. So that's why he's got like 30 home and 50 RBIs or whatever,
And, you would think that just because pitchers are pitching out of the stretch with runners on base, that batters would have an incredible advantage from that standpoint, statistically, just probability, that type of thing. And it's not just Granderson, it's the whole team that just doesn't hit with runners in scoring position. And I don't understand it. Can't figure it. But we were talking off the air a little bit. This is a team that with 6 games to play has a very realistic chance of at least making a wild card appearance in the playoffs. Given the fact that they have been absolutely decimated with injuries, this may go back as one of the, you look back years of, wow, this is an all-time favorite team of people because look what they overcame. I don't see it that way for some reason. This hasn't been a fun team to watch on a day-to-day basis. Or listen to, in my case.
No, it's been, it's been a little strange because of what's happened to the pitching. I mean, you know, when the season started, I mean, we had pitching for the next 10 years. I mean, this is great.
Right.
Wow, you know, and look at it now. I mean, three out of the 5 starters are out for the year, and the only reason that they're still in this race is that the guys that they're sticking in there to pitch, the team is something like 12-5 with those guys. Believe it or not.
Either they step up, that's part of it, and Lugo is giving them clutch,
and this guy
Selman.
I mean, this guy was the guy that Backman was telling them had the best stuff down there. And it was the last time out, he pitched 7 shutout innings, 3 hits. So, and he's been very good every time out. So that's something to look forward to for next year too. Even if you don't have every single guy back that you think you're going to have next year, and Lugo also. So, and who knows what they're going to do with Cologne. So.
Remember we had. I can't think of his first name, Daniel Weiss, from the Brooklyn Cyclone show that we did.
Mm-hmm.
He had an interesting posting that really made me feel good about being a Met fan. Of the 40 guys on the roster, 25 are Cyclones. And that's a league that where they send prospects to coming in out of high school, out of college. The best prospects go to that league. So they're being developed to the point where 25 of them are on the roster. That's a good sign for an organization. They're developing talent. Over the years, we can't say that as Mets fans, that we had an overabundance of guys coming up. And Backman, to get back on the subject, was the guy that said Rivera. He touted Rivera so much as well, the second baseman. And he's making for an interesting situation, whereas I thought would happen when he got hurt, Walker is looking to re-sign with the Mets. He's not for sure, but he'd like to. And I thought that would happen. He didn't have a showcase his final year and what have you, and he's had back problems before. But that makes for an interesting scenario. They got rid of Dilson.
Right. So if they think T.J. Rivera, if they think T.J. Rivera can handle the position on a regular basis, then guess what? Walker's money goes to Cespedes.
Which would be okay. I think they did, that'd be very fine. You can't say that there's any free agent who has made not just a bigger impact, but has fulfilled what you'd hope you'd get from a guy both last year and this year. Got to give him that. He has some shortcomings. There are times he just doesn't run out balls, but I don't know if that's because he doesn't. They've told him not to push it with your sore quad or this, that, and the other thing. So
that could be too. That could be.
Right, but he did. He does a lot
of showboating, though, Ralph. He does a lot of showboating, even in the outfield with the basket catcher. He dropped one last week, one day. Remember that? I mean, that he should have caught. And
I missed that one. Yeah.
He doesn't seem to. A lot of times he doesn't hustle hard after balls that get by him either. I don't know if, again, that could be because of the quad also. I don't know. Maybe it is.
Right.
And we don't know. But
I do know this, Mert. If there was ever a training staff, top to bottom, that needed some change of scenery. Maybe they do better training some girls softball team in Winnemucca, for instance. But that's in Nevada for any of those. And that,
right on Interstate 80. I know. I've been there on that. Well, years ago, anyway.
The gateway to Elko, which knowing that isn't a great. We took the train through there, as a matter of fact. I'll tell you, the Sierras are beautiful. I mean, and the Rockies. That was just off the subject a little bit. But we need new trainers. I would say that because, you never know with injuries. Is it caused by the training staff? Is it poor preparation? There's just been too many injuries for the Mets to give these people a benefit of the doubt. That's what.
Yeah, well, nobody knows. Nobody knows, and it's just my own personal opinion that these guys are just throwing too hard for.
Right, trying to throw 93 every pitch.
They're trying to throw 98. I mean, basically.
Even worse.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I'm thinking somebody soon. I don't know if it's going to be the Mets. Somebody's going to go to the 6-man rotation. I mean, I understand it's going to cut down. It's going to cut down on the number of starts, for your best guys.
And keep it sharp, though, Mert. That could be. Can these guys keep it as sharp with 6 days 5 days rest as?
It's only one extra day. I don't see it. I don't see why it would be such a big deal. You can get used to it. When we were growing up, there were 4-man rotations, and guys were throwing 270 innings. So.
But again, they weren't throwing as hard as they are now.
That's true. That's true.
And there's also the distinct possibility that, not to make judgments, we're in an era of it, that a lot of these guys are juiced, which means that the muscle mass that they build up oftentimes becomes too much for the ligaments and tendons by design. You got guys in high school going through Tommy John surgery. This is bullshit. I mean, there's certain things the human body was made to do, and certain things they're not made.
They're doing too much at too young of an age.
Because so much has been placed on pure speed and power, and the crafty left-hander who could make the ball spin and the Bobby Shantz kind of guy, the Whitey Ford kind of guy. Yeah. They never would be signed in today's day and age.
Yeah. Plus the fact that when we were kids played in the Little League, then they played in high school, and then they either went on to college or they signed, if they were good enough. Now, they got these travel teams that play how many months out of the year? I mean, some of them play probably 8, 9, maybe 10 months out of the year. And
you live in Florida or Southern California, Arizona, you got that kind of weather. And what really hurts the kid is that the kid a kid's a baseball player. If he plays basketball, he's going to use those skills that he develops on the basketball court, that coordination, the balance and stuff, to help in his baseball. And if a kid just plays one sport, I think it limits them as a human, as a child, as the whole thing's supposed to be fun. And if 1 out of 500, not even 500, 5,000 little leaguers make the majors, and so much is put into the idea of make it or bust, forget about the fun, something's wrong with that too. But you could see these parents who have a kid and it's their quote way out of the doldrums of whatever society has created for them.
Yep.
I say give the kid a dictionary and a science book, and boy, he's going to be all set. If he plays ball, he plays ball. But to breed him like these tennis academies, doesn't seem right. I wouldn't have wanted to do that to my kid, or wouldn't have wanted to have that done to me, although I would have appreciated a little more support in terms of my ambitions and what have you. That's just the way it goes. Nothing's perfect.
Sure.
So we got 6 more games, actually 5. Let's assume they lose tonight. And they were the worst they could be in at the end of the evening is, as I see it, a tie, and it could come down to a 3-way tie for it all.
Well, it's possible. Although, they've been handling Philadelphia pretty easily. So they do finish the last 3 games in Philadelphia.
That's true. I think that this game is not indicative of anything because playing Miami, Jose Fernandez just passed. So he was supposed to pitch tonight as well. I can just see Miami just being on a different level tonight. And, so let's just say with 5 games to go, they're virtually tied. This is exciting. I will give Bud Selig that. At first I thought, boy, it's already been cheapened enough. Don't cheapen it anymore with the second wild card, but you have 30 teams, and it certainly keeps it interesting.
Right.
And
absolutely.
He's done a lot of things like making the All-Star game a regular game. That's craziness. And kowtowing to the unions and the owners in not identifying steroids as a disease, as an infection in baseball soon enough. And I think what we saw in the 90s wasn't really what we should have been seeing, and I feel ripped off by that. But
I don't know if it would have changed if Congress didn't get on their case.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Once that happened, that's when they had to change things. So.
Right. They would have kept on denying and amazing that the Congress has to go to baseball and say, well, this isn't right. What you're doing is immoral, or it's that Congress. Okay, Congress, thanks. We really appreciate it. Coming from you, that means a lot to baseball. Who's judging who? No, that's not right at all. We can't stay long, Congresses. We have the bankers to pay off or to be paid off by. They're coming in a little later. They're in a separate meeting room. But and then we're going to vote on Iraq and stuff like that. So we're the ones to judge. Crazy world, Mert, huh?
Yeah. We'll get crazier tonight.
Yes, we have the debate coming up, and we're not going to talk about that because this is fun and games. We're in the candy store of life, and I like to keep it like that for at least a chunk of the period of the day when I don't have to worry about who has his or her finger on the button. And I'm more worried about who has his finger on the button, but not by much. Okay, Mert, listen in for Duffy in the second hour, and I want to thank you for being Marty Rose.
Well,
and that's over the course of a lifetime.
That's 6 decades, yeah. So.
Yeah, wow. Love you, Mert.
All right,
talk soon.
Care, next week.
All right, everybody out there, hang in there. Keep on keeping on. Adios. Hey, that's what I did this morning. I waited for the phone to ring, and suddenly we're all comfortably zoned. I'm Ralph Tyko, the Zigzag Man. We're here in Alameda, California, and it's kind of a bittersweet show I'm trying to produce here because America lost an icon. Yogi Berra passed away, and I'm a kid, grew up in New York, baseball fan. I loved Yogi. I was not a Yankee fan. I was a Yankee worshiper. I was a New York Giant fan and then became a Met fan. And I'm honoring him by getting a few folks on to talk about his life, people who knew him. One of those who knew him was first-time guest on my show, and he is a former New York Met and teammate of Yogi's when they were both on the Mets. Yogi is a coach. I'd like to welcome Duffy Dyer. Duffy Dyer from Arizona. How are you?
I'm good, Ralph. How are you?
All right, good. How are things where it gets awfully hot these days?
Oh, they're starting to cool down a little bit. Back up to over 100 today, but last few days been pretty nice.
Yeah, back up to just 100. What was it the last few days?
Oh, it was in the 90s. It's starting to cool down a little bit, and the evenings are getting nice. So we're getting there. Another month, and it'll be very nice here, and everybody will start flocking here.
You're from Arizona, but you're not originally from Arizona. You grew up in Ohio. Am I correct?
Well, I was born in Ohio, but my family moved out here when I was 5 years old. So, no, I grew up here and went to school here, and it's the only home I know.
Good. And you played high school ball, and you got signed out of high school with the Mets. I think it was 1966.
I went to high school here, but then I went to Arizona State University and signed after my junior year at Arizona State.
Ah, did not realize that. Reggie Jackson country, am I correct?
Yes, Reggie and I signed the same year.
And, wow, what was Reggie like at Arizona State? Was he like he was all through his baseball career?
Yes, pretty much so. Yeah, he actually went to Arizona State and started on the football team. It was a safety on the football team, which was very good at that time. He played for Frank Cush, and
Frank Cush was
he came out for baseball. I think he came out for baseball so he could get out of spring football. But he had a great year. He broke most of Rick Mundy's records at Arizona State. In '65, we had won the national championship, and Mundy and Bando were both on the team. And then in '66, Reggie came because Reggie was a sophomore. In those days, freshmen couldn't play on varsity teams. So Reggie had to wait till his sophomore year, and that was in '66.
And you signed after your junior year. Second year of the draft, 1966. So things were changing. Do you feel you benefited by the draft system, or you might have been better off as a free agent like Monday was?
Well, Monday wasn't a free agent. He was the first guy ever drafted.
He was the first guy ever. You're absolutely correct.
I was 65, the first guy ever drafted. I think I benefited from it. I probably benefited from it. But it's hard to say.
Where did you go originally in the Mets system?
I went to AA ball in Williamsport, Pennsylvania.
Okay, and you remember who your manager was? Of course you do. Who was your manager?
Bill Verdon was my first manager.
Bill Verdon of Pittsburgh Pirate fame.
Right. Yeah, he was great to start with. He sure knew the fundamentals, and he couldn't help me a whole lot catching defensively, but he sure worked us hard and taught us a lot of fundamentals.
Who was your catching instructor in the system at that time?
Clyde McCullough.
Clyde McCullough, right. Okay.
Yeah.
And did he appreciably change your way, or were you pretty well set coming out of Arizona? This is big-time baseball, Pac-10 baseball.
Right. He didn't change me much defensively. No, I stayed about the same. I was definitely a two-handed catcher. This is a couple of years before Johnny Bench came along and made the one-handed catching very popular. I caught with the old, what they call a pud, the old glove, catcher's glove that had no break in it, so you had to catch two hands. You couldn't catch the ball with just your glove or one hand. So Yogi's actually the one that got me to change. I was playing catch with him one day and in spring training, and he tossed me his glove and said, "Here, use this." And I said, "Yogi, I don't think I can use this kind of glove because I can't get the ball out fast enough. You know, I had a pretty quick release and an average arm strength, but I could get rid of the ball pretty quick. And I thought if I changed gloves that I wouldn't get it out as quick. So I was a little resistant at first, but Yogi stayed on me, and I ended up changing gloves and became a little bit more of a one-handed catcher."
Amazing how things are passed down. Yogi was taught by Bill Dickey, and what kind of a coach was he? Was he a player's coach? Was a kind of guy who could relate, or because he was so skilled and so many Hall of Famers and great players do have a hard time, was he able to relate to the players?
Well, for me personally, he helped me a lot defensively as far as calling games and just talking to me, not so much fundamentally catching and that, which is the mental part of catching, working with pitchers and calling games, things like that. He really helped me a great deal. Of course, we had Rube Walker as a pitching coach, and he was a former catcher, and we had Joe Pignatano, who was our bullpen coach, and he was a former catcher. And Coach Gil Hodges was a catcher for a little while before they made him a first baseman. So we had a lot of catching instruction, actually, and they really helped me a great deal with the mental part of the game as far as calling games, working pitching staffs, things of that nature. And as far as Yogi as a hitting coach, he was definitely a player's coach. I mean, everybody loved him, obviously, because of his personality, and he was never real serious. I mean, if he was trying to help you, he'd be serious, but it would sort of always be in a humorous way. And, I mean, all I can remember Yogi saying about hitting was see the ball, hit the ball. And that's the way he hit. If he saw it, he swung at it and hit it. But
and there were times it could be out of the strike zone, well over his head, and he would be swinging.
I know, yeah. But he was a great coach, definitely a player's coach. Everybody just loved being around the guy. If you came to the park and you were down a little bit or in a bad mood or something, all you had to do was hang around Yogi, and your mood would certainly change.
How did you like New York? I know you love playing for the Mets, but how did you adjust Midwestern attitude, family growing up?
It was very hard, to be honest with you. My wife and I moved there opening day of '69, and it was a tough time finding an apartment, and Tug McGraw and Jerry Kuzman helped us, and because they lived near Shea over at by near LaGuardia. We were all renting over there at that time. And
I grew up in that neighborhood in Jackson Heights, and
yes,
know it very well. Northern Boulevard, and
right, exactly.
Yeah, you guys were there, and it was the first few years of Shea, and it was very, very exciting years.
Yeah.
When you came up, you were not expecting, I am sure, the Miracle Mets of 1969. with spring
No,
training?
I definitely wasn't, especially being a rookie. I didn't know quite what to expect. I was just in awe of being in the big leagues, period. And
Right.
Going and being in all these other ballparks and seeing all these other great players that I had never played against. I had been up for a month in '68, so I'd seen a little bit of it and gotten my feet wet a little bit. But I was just in awe of being in the big leagues. And, you know, some of the players I've heard over the years thought we had a chance to win it all. But I certainly I hadn't thought much about it. I know in spring training I remember a few of the guys, I don't remember who it was, but saying, you know, we because of our pitching, we certainly can play 500, if not above. And so we were very optimistic as far as improving and being a lot better than we were in '68. But I hadn't heard anybody mention winning the World Series, that's for sure. But I know we were very high on making a big improvement.
How big a factor was Gil Hodges in terms of turning the team around?
I don't think we'd have done it without him. I mean, he was such a great leader and handled people so well. He just had something about him that everybody respected him so much. And he was at the right place at the right time. He just did a great job of keeping us all motivated, and he sort of left us alone. I mean, he would stay in his office most of the time, and he very seldom would come out in the clubhouse and hang around in the clubhouse with the players and that. And he was just the right guy at the right time, the way he ran the ball club, the way he ran the pitching staff. He and the coaching staff, it just all gelled there at the right time, the way he platooned a few players and the way he rested other guys. And I'm sure we wouldn't have done it without him.
Right. I think I remember the game when the Mets showed themselves that, you know, we can do this. And that was a Koosman game against the Cubs. And I just think that was the game. I remember seeing that on television. I was out in California in the Air Force. And I'm thinking, wow, because it was 7 short years when they were the amazing Mets the other way. They could have been the worst team that was ever assembled. And they built it up. And two of the people that were most responsible for the scouting and all that, one was George Weiss, believe it or not. He gets a lot of bad publicity or bad rap for the Mets not winning initially, but I think he set the tone in terms of building a farm system. And the other is Whitey Herzog. Did you have much contact with him?
Yes, I did. When I was in the minor league, he was a director of player development, and he had a lot to do with my career because when I first signed, went to Double-A, I was over my head offensively. I mean, the Eastern League was known for its pitching. It's definitely a pitcher's league. It's cold, the ballparks are big, and I really struggled with the bat. I held my own defensively, but I came home after the season was over, and for the first time in my life, I'm thinking, I don't know if I can do this or not, because if I can't do any better hitting in Double-A, how am I ever going to move up? But Whitey called me, and he says, I want you to come down to the instructional league, and we're going to work on your hitting, and once you keep your head up. And he came out and told me, he says, you're going to be in the big leagues in 3 years. And, man, I'm thinking, what? So I went to the instructional league for 2 straight years, and he was right. I mean, I did gradually get a little bit better, and I was in the big leagues in 2.5 years, and so I owe him a lot. I don't know if I'd ever made it without Whitey.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about him in relationship to the Mets making a change and coming up. A good man, good baseball man. The Rat, right? The White Rat.
Yeah, White Rat. Yeah.
The White Rat. What was your first day in the big leagues like? You came up in '68. You remember your first at bat? What was that like?
I played my first game in Philadelphia. We had a doubleheader. It was about around September 4th or 5th, something like that. We had just won the AAA team in Jacksonville had just won the Governor's Cup, and there was 4 or 5 of us that got called up. And we reported, flew to Philadelphia. They were in Philadelphia, the Mets were in Philadelphia playing the Phillies. And my first impression was we got off the plane. Of course, I think there was 4 of us. There was Amos Otis and Bobby Heiss, and I think Don Shaw and myself. And we get off the plane.
How about Rod Gaspar? Was Gaspar part of that?
No, he wasn't. No,
okay.
he wasn't in that group. He might have. I don't. No, he definitely wasn't with us in Jacksonville.
Well, he goes down. Gaspar goes down as one of my favorite memories because in that World Series, Frank Robinson asked, "Who the hell is Rod Gaspar?"
Right.
Remember that? They did not take the Mets seriously, and they got a rude awakening. But sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
So anyway, we get out of the cab. The cab takes us, we say, take us to Connie Mack Stadium. And it was quite a surprise when we got out of the cab at Connie Mack. And the cab driver said we had our luggage, our suitcases and that, of course. And he said, if I was you, I'd get inside the stadium as quick as I could. Don't be hanging around out here. Because it was not a very nice area, for one thing. And so we get into the ballpark and finally find out where the visitors' locker room is. We walk in there, and our locker room in Jacksonville was a lot nicer than it was at Connie Mack Stadium. It was small, and now you've got the extra players there in September. It was crowded, so it was really a sort of a letdown thinking, my goodness, this is the big leagues, First impression was not too good as far as the locker room.
Here I am, and this is it.
Yeah. And I remember we played a night game that night, and of course it was a thrill to watch that game. And the next day we had a doubleheader, and Gil said, "You're going to catch the first game," and so I did. And it was just such a thrill. I remember the dugouts were pretty small too. And I stood up and I hit my head on the top of the dugout. I was so excited, Matt. And but I struck out my first time up. I faced a crafty left-hander, Chris Short, who had quite a career, and he got me with a sinker away and struck me out. But my second time up, I did get a single off of him for my first hit in the major leagues, and that's something, of course, I'll never forget. But we lost the teams.
Did they save the ball for you?
No, they didn't. No, they didn't do that
really?
Much in those days. Yeah, no, we didn't do it in those days. I wish I had have, but no. And anyway, we lost 3-1. Dick Selma pitched one of his best games of the year. In fact, I think he went 6 or 7 innings and really pitched well. He had good stuff, but a lot of times he had control trouble. But that day he was hitting his spots, and it was a real good ball game.
Duffy, let me ask you. You play with a lot of guys in the minors. Who didn't make it that surprised you by not making it? Who did you see when you saw him originally and say, "Oh boy, this guy's"?
We had an outfielder named Sean Fitzmaurice that I thought would definitely make it. He was one of our better players in Double-A, and he and Amos Otis, I thought, were the 2 best outfielders in the organization. And Sean never quite made it. I was surprised. I thought he was definitely a big prospect. But,
they traded Amos for Joey Foy, if I remember correctly. That was...
yes, they did. Yeah.
And that was not the best of trades.
Yeah. Well, there was something behind that. I'm not sure they wanted to make that trade, but we were pretty desperate for a third baseman at the time. And Gil went to Amos and said, "Amos, I want to put you to third base. I know you're a great center fielder, but we've got AG and we need a third baseman, so we're going to move you to third base." And Amos said, "No, I don't want to play third base. I'm a center fielder." So that had a lot to do with trading of Amos Otis.
Can you shed some light on the trading of Nolan Ryan? You mentioned that you weren't particularly nuts about New York. Apparently, he hated New York.
Yeah, I think that was a big reason that one of the big reasons I've heard anyway. That he and Ruth, his wife, they never made quite the adjustment to New York that most of us did. I ended up loving New York, but I was going to tell you earlier that my wife and I, it was a tough adjustment the first few months, finding an apartment and then just the different lifestyle, being so crowded everywhere you went, and we were afraid to drive down to Manhattan and it just, it took us a few months to get adjusted, and we already had two very small children, so it was a little nerve-wracking at first. But once we made some friends, one of your
children is a radio producer, I might add.
Well, I don't know about that, but they still remember a lot about New York. But anyway, Nolan did not like New York, and neither did his wife. And I know he went to the Mets and asked to be traded because he just was not comfortable there.
Okay, well, that was another one for a third baseman that didn't quite work out. Fregosi just wasn't the Fregosi of old, it seemed. And that was kind of goes down as not one of the best deals of all time. But can you compare the current Met pitching staff to the Met pitching staff that was so young in 68 and 69, Seaver, Kuzman, Gentry, those guys? Do you see anything in common? And then I want to ask you about pitch counts and how, these guys were pitching 300 innings a year back then, 250 right. Early on. I want to ask you about whether or not you feel that pitchers are curtailed by the current way of, the conventional way of looking at things.
The first part of the question is the only way I can compare them is the Mets have a bunch of great young arms that all throw in the mid to high 90s. And that's what we had when we won it in 69, is we had those three guys you mentioned it all through in the middle 90s to close to 100. And, of course, with our fourth guy, Nolan, did throw 100. But, so we had a lot of great young arms at the time. So I would definitely say there is a comparison to the young arms they have there today, because they do have some great young arms. And
they all stayed healthy. They all stayed healthy for a number of years. Kuzman, Seaver, those guys. And already, today's day and age, Tommy John surgery. If you haven't had it, you're going to get it. You're recovering first time, second time, pitch counts, this thing with Harvey going on. What do you remember when it changed from the workhorse pitcher that took pride in completing a game to the way it is today with Boros, the agent demanding this, that, and the other thing in terms of limiting innings? What changed things?
Well, the only thing I can say, there's a few things I think had something to do with it. I personally, now I don't know this and I'm not an expert in it, but I think once weight training came into it and conditioning, that had to do something with injuries. I just think there are more arm and shoulder injuries now. And I know there are a lot of great, weight training coaches and that out there, but and they know what they're doing, so maybe I'm way off base, but I really think that now that players, they train totally different than we did. And I think that leads to a lot more injuries myself, whether it's leg injuries, arm, shoulder, whatever it might be. And I think they started putting pitch limits because of agents and because of they got enormous salaries. Their owners and everyone's looking at the investments they have, so they're trying to cut back on innings and that because they're trying to limit injuries and et cetera and et cetera. So I think the money that players are making has something to do with it, and I think the powerful agents, which are becoming more powerful every year, have something to do with it. And I really think as far as the amount of injuries, in our day, almost the only thing we did, we weren't allowed to touch weights, and about the only conditioning we did was sit-ups and pick-ups and run, a lot of running. And,
right.
you know, I just think those things have a lot to do with pitch counts and the number of innings pitched and things like that. But I also think that a lot of young kids in Little League and high school and that start throwing too many off-speed pitches and et cetera too early, because a lot of kids are hurting themselves before they ever get out of high school. So I think that has something to do with it also.
Okay. Is that how the game has changed most since you got into it? Of all the changes?
Oh, pitching, the pitching, the way they use pitchers now, I mean, you've got your seventh inning pitcher, your eighth inning. It's all specialized now. You've got, it amazes me how players nowadays, they've got to know their role. If you're a manager, you got to tell each player, this is your role. You're going to pitch the seventh inning. You're going to pitch the sixth inning. You're going to be along. When we played, you come to the park ready to play. You come to the park ready to pitch. You know, if you're a starter, obviously you knew you were a starter. But if you were a reliever, you didn't know if you were going to get in the game in the sixth inning, the fourth inning, the eighth inning. And then they started, obviously, while I was playing with closers. But
right.
You might have your ninth inning closer. But outside of that, the guys in the bullpen, they were used differently. And now the pitching is so specialized that I think that's made a lot of changes in the game, and players having to know what their role is. They're very unhappy. Oh, I didn't know what my role was. Well, you know, I don't think it's a manager's job to have to tell the guy, well, you know, you're going to have to do this or do that. To me, you come to the park ready to pitch or ready to play, and if your name's on the card, you go get them, and if it's not, you wait your turn.
Right. Now, you spent most of your career in the National League, and you ended up with Detroit in the American League. Did you notice a difference in the style of leagues? I've asked different players this over the years and gotten different responses. Was it a big adjustment? Did you go, wow, this is a different brand of ball?
Yes, I did. The American League threw a lot more off-speed pitches. They didn't have near as many hard throwers as the National League. And they had a lot more pitchers that threw a lot more change-ups and breaking balls, sliders, curved balls, off-speed pitches in the American League than the National League. The National League, I think they challenged you more with fastballs.
Okay, and
I definitely noticed that hitting and catching. It was quite an adjustment calling the game, going over calling the game to a pitcher in the American League than it was in the National League. It was a lot different.
DH changes things, I'm sure.
Oh, no question. No question. That's probably the biggest change in the game over the last 50, 40 years. Yeah.
Good. What would you do differently if you had it to do? You know, what would you take into the game that you know now that, you know, life is wasted on the young, that kind of thing? What's the one thing you would tell a Fitzmaurice, for instance, the guy with the talent that didn't make it? What would you tell him at this point, knowing what you know?
Well, as far as myself, I wouldn't do anything different. I was blessed, so I wouldn't do anything different. I love the game. I still coach some. I have a passion for it. So for me personally, I don't think I'd do anything different. Yeah, I would rather have had more ability and been an all-star and all that. But besides that, I loved my career. I loved the teams I played with. As far as telling a younger young man is, if it's your dream, you just got to keep working at it. There were a lot of players that had a lot of God-given ability, but did not give a very good effort. Sean wasn't one of those guys. Fitzmaurice, he tried hard. He just, a lot of players reach their peak at a certain age and they keep getting better and better, and then at a certain level, they just, they peak out and don't get any better, And, at the age of 21, you might think, boy, they're a real prospect. But at the age of 23, they're not any better than they were. So other players pass them up. But it's like anything. Yeah. You've got to want it. You got to work hard.
Yogi had an expression that he's almost famous for, that baseball is 90% mental and 50% the rest of it, or whatever. Yeah. How much is the mental part of it, controlling your head, pacing yourself? How important is that? And have you seen guys fail because they just couldn't keep their heads together?
Oh, yes, I've seen a lot of that. And I've managed in the minor leagues for many years and coached in the big leagues for many years. And unfortunately, you see a lot of that the mental approach has cost a lot of guys their career, or they couldn't relax, or couldn't handle. I mean, I've seen some players that couldn't handle New York. It just they couldn't relax and play well in New York. It cost them their career, and their temperament, their emotions. Some players were too emotional and just sort of ran themselves out of the game because they couldn't relax. They just the mental part of the game. Yogi was right. Because a lot of players have the physical ability, but it's how you use it and the mental approach you take to it, and being able to calm yourself down and slow the game down a little bit, and being able to handle stressful situations and that. And a lot of players with great ability physically just couldn't handle situations like that. So that makes a huge difference.
Okay. I've been saving this one up because I want to talk about a fellow that you were bench coach under out here where I live for the Oakland A's, and that is Art Howe. One of my all-time favorites. I think he got a horrible deal with that movie that came out. He was the guy who played him was miscast. It was terrible, and I think he got a horrible deal from management in Oakland. And I'll tell you why I like Art Howe after you respond to that.
I agree with you 100%. I thought the movie berated him, and the guy who played him was very out of character, did not remind me of Art at all. And I thought the movie portrayed him as making a lot of mistakes and being the bad guy in the movie, and that wasn't true at all. I disliked the movie very much. Art is, well, of course, he's a very good friend of mine, but he's just a true gentleman. He was almost too nice, to be honest with you. There were times when he was man. There were times when I would wish he'd get on somebody a little bit in that, and he just had a tough time doing that. That he was almost just too nice. But I thought he was a great baseball guy, very dear friend, very loyal, and almost too loyal to a fault. It was just, I think that's what ended up costing him his job, and I thought the management in Oakland really screwed him.
Yeah. I just wanted that on record because I concur 100%. And I'm going to tell you how I know Art's a great human being, because I guess it was 1996, 95, at Picture Day, and they let all the parents with their kids go out, the perimeter, and the players would come by, and Art comes by, and, the players would pose, and my kid is 5, little guy. Players would pose and they'd bend down, they'd kneel over and try to get their faces in. Art goes down like a catcher, puts his arm around the kid, looks him in the eye, talks to him a little bit, tells him that, you like baseball, game could be yours, blah, blah, blah. You don't have to be a big guy to play baseball. Just communicated with the kid. And I think my thing in going through life, you can't fool kids. My kid came away, he was glowing. And he didn't know who in the hell Art Howe was. He says, wow. Matt Stairs was like that day.
you guys don't have any idea how much of an effect you have on children, how I could think of being, go back to when I was 5 and seeing my heroes at the polo grounds and what have you, and just the thrill. So I wanted to talk about the gentleman, you yourself included, that recognize that the game is a privilege. The game is should be respected, and it's cool to talk to you. You know what I'm saying?
Well, thank you. Yeah.
All right. You've been a terrific guest, and thanks for helping honor the legacy of Yogi. He will never be replaced, but like Peter Golenbach said in an earlier interview with me that will be included in this, he lived to be 90. He lived in a mansion. Everybody loved him. It was a tremendous life. So joy to him, and I hope his passing was painless. That's the best you can say. He'll never be forgotten.
No, he won't. He's a great human being, and like you said, he's an icon.
All right, Duff. Hey, listen, I hope you'll come back someday, and you'll keep in touch, and it's really been nice for me, and these are great memories, and thanks for 1969, huh?
All right, Ralph, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
All right, I'm going to end the show the way I do most. I'm going to implore you, Duffy, and my audience to keep your dreams wet and your humor dry. Keep your kids out of military recruiting stations and off the laps of clerics wearing dresses, just to be on the safe side all around. Keep on keeping on, and have a great day, Duff.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye.